Thank you again for staying for round two. This is the question and answer session right now where we will be asking the panel, and the panel can also ask themselves questions on the topics that we've had this morning. Before we start the question and answer session, a couple of things. One, for the sake of the video and the clarity, I'm going to ask anybody who has a question to step forward and where I am now and take the microphone and ask their questions. At the same time, or in the meantime, I'm going to ask Brother Herman Davis to introduce himself and talk for a few minutes on what projects he has taken so that we know what questions to ask him. At the same time, I would like to thank Senator Sharif Street for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate the time he's taken to come and spend some time with us. Thank you, Senator.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Herman Davis, and I represent an organization called Peace and Love. My topic that I was talking about today was forgiveness, self-esteem, and domestic violence. And why was those my topics? Because my oldest sister was murdered by her husband at the age of 25. They had 3 children. I think I was 14 when that happened. So I had some experience with witnessing domestic violence. Why was I touching on self-esteem? Because I believe that low self-esteem, there's not just men, but women, are predators for individuals with low self-esteem. And I witnessed that. And why do I say forgiveness? Forgiveness was one of my topics because I learned that I had to forgive the man that murdered my sister, and I learned forgiving him had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with myself. And I knew that was the first step of getting somewhere different than I was at. And that's who I am, Herman Davis. Peace and love.
Okay, my question is to Brother Shahir. A lot of times there could be conflicts between the Islamic teachings, the Sharia, and the laws of the land, right, like U.S. law. One example is like Quran allows you can have 4 wives if you can take the record, right? If you can afford. If you fear, then you marry one. But according to U.S. law, you can marry only one, right? So how do you deal with that situation? What would be your advice?
Well, that's a good question. The thing is, though, if you look at U.S. law, and you look at parties and blocks who goes above that, example, the Mormons in Utah, where they have constantly 4 or 5 wives, 6, 10 wives, and their political basis, they control that area, basically. They have senators, they have congressmen, they have all these things that allows them or backs them to be able to do what their religion says they can do. But when it comes to psychology, there's no conflict in that for me. My interest is not if you have 4 wives or not. My interest would be in what's the problem within the marriage. So if you have 1 wife or 4 wives, my solution would be the same for that. I'm not there to dictate laws or Sharia or anything like that. So that wouldn't be my question or my concern. And as psychologists, we don't give advice. So if someone comes to me and says, what do you think about me getting another wife? Or should I get a 3rd wife or should I get a 4th wife? The psychologists give that question back to them. What do you mean? What can you do? You answer that question. So no, I wouldn't give advice on that. I wouldn't even discuss that if that was an issue.
But it is illegal, right, to have more than 1 wife.
I wouldn't. I mean, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, and if it comes to me, it wouldn't be an issue of legality of if you can have more than 1 wife or not. I'm not, again, as a psychologist, we can't use our opinions and we can't have advice. So if someone comes to me and says something, I don't pray, I only pray 1 time a day. I won't say, oh man, why not? But that's none of my business. My question would be, what can we do to assist if you would like to pay more. Something like that would be my question to that. So no, I'm not into the legality of more than one wife now. That's none of my business.
I'd like to add to that.
I would like to add to that something. As a nurse in the ER, I have to accept patients, wherever they may be. One day I got a gentleman who was in there for STD, that's a sexually transmitted disease. And he had a new name for it now, but he was married, and his doting wife was by his side. And he came to the nurse station and said, "Don't tell my wife why I'm here." So I have to respect the confidentiality, so it also tells me that he didn't get it from his wife. Now, my colleagues who go by their nafs, I try to make my gender Muslim as best I can. I still have to treat him with respect. My goal is not to tell him what he should have done and shouldn't have done and stuff for Allah, because what Allah says about fornication, he's going to hell. And I have my personal beliefs, but I have to treat him like a patient and take care of him and whatever presenting problem he has. And my colleagues, we had to get blood from him. So everybody was asking me, can I please get the blood? Because they was going to use a large bore needle, which is always painful. You can't in any way make it non-painful. The smaller ones, which I take my pride in doing, is to get the needle, and the patient's like, when is it going in? I say it's already in. And that's based on my concern about needles. I'm the biggest chicken when it comes to getting needles, so I found ways to make it. But when you get those big bore needles, they always hurt. Everybody wanted to give, they called them a scumbag at the nursing station and a lot of other names. But me as a nurse, going in that room with that patient, it's not my business what he's doing. His wife is sitting there talking to me, honey. So, just so you know, in the helping professions, it's actually against the rules to even engage in that with people. And I have to treat them the same as I would any other person who's a good citizen, who's a moral person, and an upstanding, righteous person. I hope that helps.
My question is to Brother Sahir. Earlier you mentioned in the course of your presentation that somewhere is up to 75-80% of the African American Muslim marriages result in divorce. And I was just wondering, what are you basing that on? Is this anecdotal, or was there a study conducted to make that claim? Or what's the basis for your statement?
Well, that was all opinion. Nothing hard evidence. And my opinion is based on the marriages that I see and that I do that myself, rushed marriages, experience by other people who talk to me about their marriages. So it's not hard evidence, but I know for a fact that it's higher than the national average for the United States, which is 50%. So my 90% is my exaggerated opinion.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question for Sister Maryam. You said addressing the needs of children experiencing trauma. How would you recognize a child who's starting to experience trauma or violence or domestic violence? What are the signs you should look for so that you know that this child is going through this sad situation? Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that we failed probably to mention today is the biology of the brain and how it works. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in us a way to be able, I think Sister, the nurse had mentioned about us making pathways and groups in our brains. With children, lots of studies have been done that even in embryo, during pregnancy, if the mother is experiencing some type of trauma or domestic violence, it can affect the child, even though the child hasn't been born yet. With that said, the neurons in our brain tend to act in certain ways in certain people. Not everyone will have the same reaction. It's sort of like if everyone took out their cell phone today, and depending on the network that you're associated with, that network may or may not have a service. So your brain is sort of similar, where the waves that are coming into the brain, depending on what's being experienced by the child, may have an effect on the child, may be a traumatic effect on the child, may be a mild effect on the child. Each child is different. And to be able to identify in every child a sense of whether they've been exposed to violence or trauma, it may not be the same for every single child. So you may see children experiencing, depending if it's in the home, you may see them experiencing withdrawal from the family, maybe secluding themselves in their room, maybe trying to seek out attention, trying to derail the family from maybe an argument that the parents are having. So they'll act out so that the attention can be drawn onto them to try to intercede and avoid that particular situation. You may also run into children who may complain that they're ill, so that the attention is no longer, if they're seeing violence portrayed on someone else, that the attention will be taken away from that. So you'll see the child, without actually knowing what he's doing or she's doing, play a part in that. You may see them have nightmares. You may see them wet the bed when they usually don't. You may see their eating habits change. You may see their school habits change. There are many different areas that you may be able to tune into with your child. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Sister Mary. Another question, Mother? Please come on.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is directed to Brother Davis. You mentioned that you had, I think, witnessed your brother's death, and then that you found out that it wasn't about you in terms of healing about him, but it was about you. My question is, did you actually undergo some type of counseling, or how did you deal with that traumatic experience? Thank you.
Actually, I was 14. It's funny, when I arrived, I think one of the presenters were talking about, we were young men were told not to cry. And I was told not to cry when my sister was murdered. My brother-in-law told me that I needed to be strong for my mom, for my sisters, and I needed to be strong for my niece and nephews. So what my parents did is they put my sister's children in counseling. I didn't go to counseling, and it was okay. And my thing was be strong for my mom and dad needed to do what they needed to do. So I seek counseling, and like I said, I was 14. I seek counseling when I was 24, because with death, at least with my sisters, a lot of ugly things came out. So it wasn't a thing that we lost a firstborn child, and my parents found my sister. It wasn't about the family got tied together. It actually opened up a lot of stuff that we wasn't aware of, or at least I wasn't aware of. So yes, I did seek counseling at 24 years old, but the forgiveness didn't kick in until I was 34 years old. And what I'd like to say about that is prayer, because and I hadn't converted to Islam yet, but what I did is I thought that I had to tell him that I forgave him. That's what I thought. So I was actually on my way to the prison to visit him. I've arrived at the prison early, meaning that I was the first visitor in the visiting room. And I sat until all the other visits went in. I was the last person that they called up. And when they called me up, the correctional officer, she actually took me outside. And she said that she knew who I was, and that I wasn't allowed to visit him. Which took me by surprise, because I'm trying to get rid of that word, because I asked my nephew, who, and this is a a whole different side of the story, but my nephew actually asked his dad, I said, actually tell your dad I want to come see him. And, I want to talk to him. So his dad said, come on up to the prison, tell Herman to come up to the prison, but tell him to come in as an organization, not on his list, visitors list. So what it looked like that I was trying to do something conniving or mischief or it didn't look right. And I didn't know how it all was supposed to go. So when she brought that to my attention, it was rather embarrassing and it was rather humbling at the same time. Because remember, I was the first visitor in the visiting room, meaning I was the first car on the parking lot, meaning I was the closest car to the entrance, meaning that my walk back to my car was literally from here to where the sister is standing at. But it was the longest walk I had ever walked in my life.
How many siblings?
I have 3. I'm a baby boy and 3 sisters. But when I got back to my car, that walk back to my car was when I realized me seeing him, me telling him that I forgave him, it had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with me. And when I say prayer, he was in Chester prison at the time, from South Street Bridge. Anybody can think about a little past the airport, from the South Street Bridge. I prayed from the South Street Bridge all the way to the prison. Just kept praying. Because I didn't know the man that had murdered my sister. Do I shake his hand? Do I shake his hand? Do I give him a fist pump? So I didn't, I'm playing with all of this on my way to the prison, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. And prayer worked because I didn't even have to confront him or see him to realize what forgiving was about. Because I don't know if that was a test. Now I'm standing in front of the man that murdered my sister. That forgiveness go out the window. Am I going to jump for him? So, and I'm constantly tested about forgiveness because it's a process. It's a process. And have I met him?
I mean, did you ever see him?
After that? No. No, and I don't have to. There's no need to. I forgave him. Doesn't mean that I have to put money on his books or call him or anything. Me forgiving him has nothing to do with him. And I would encourage everybody, just like Sister Shirley said and the other sister said, before, if you just take a minute and think, and you put those emotions in that box, and you take that box over there, you put that box down, and you leave that box over there. I learned how to do that, and I it's a process.
I was wondering what his reaction would have been, whether he accepted your forgiveness, or how he reacted.
I can understand that, but it doesn't even matter. It's not even about him. Whether he accepted that, it doesn't matter. And that's where I'm at. It's about me. It's not about him. And I thought it was about him, but the forgiveness is it's like half of the antidote to what you're dealing with. When you recognize that, and then you get to begin to start healing. And I began to heal. I couldn't even talk about my sister's death as much as I could talk about it now. I couldn't talk about it. I would get choked up, lump in my throat, couldn't talk about it. But forgiving him made it so easy to talk about. So easy to talk about. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, no problem.
MashaAllah, brother. Thank you for sharing and being so honest with everything. May Allah bless you. Any other questions from the audience? Young man, please come up. I think you're going to be a future counselor. Inshallah. Come on over where the camera can see you.
I have a question about addressing adult teen parenting conflicts. So you said no punishments, right? So you said no punishments, right?
Okay, we'll give him that.
No, you said you weren't no cruel punishments, right?
Cruel punishment, yes.
Oh, what if your kid is naturally disobedient? What if you try to nudge him in a direction he never obeys, and you feel that he like deserves, or he or she deserves, like more than like a timeout.
What I mean?
Like, what are you supposed to do if you like kid?
So you're asking if someone or a child who is misbehaving and he or she is not responding to the punishment. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Punish him. Good enough.
And I have a question about for your sister, not yeah.
So the question is for me or for him? Okay, so
I have a question about your sister, like the murderer. I know like you're gonna forgive him, but wouldn't like you be curious to see his face or something? Like, or curious why he did it?
So let me answer the first question, and then you can answer the second question. So you're talking about punishment. I think the best way to deal with children is to sit and talk with them about what they did, and explain to them why it's wrong or bad. I think the approach of explaining and sharing feelings with them, and for them to understand what's happening, is better than taking punishment right in the beginning. Then when they get convinced of what they did, then if they persist and they do it again, then we'll think of another option. But we always give them the benefit of the doubt first, and try to explain. Maybe they don't understand if it's good, it's bad, or not good to do what they did. So we need to explain to them, and we need to let them know the consequences of what they did. Does that make sense to you?
Forgive me, I'm aging. What was your question?
So you always say you have to forgive, like forgive and forget, right?
I didn't say forgive.
But forgive.
Forgive.
Okay. But how are you not curious?
Oh, I'm not curious. How am I not curious?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you hear me reference my nephew? I asked my nephew to ask his dad if I could see him. Remember me saying that?
Yeah, but I didn't quite understand.
Okay, so let me explain that real quick. My nephew actually testified against his dad, and his testimony was the key testimony to get his dad life in prison. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Allahu A'lam, 10 years later, my nephew was arrested and sentenced to prison. Not for abuse. He had the chance to see his father in prison. And we're firm believers that was ordained, that was meant to happen. Because siblings or family members are not supposed to be in the same institution. My nephew was there for 5 months, and his first three of those 5 months he spent with his father. And what he was able to do, he was able to ask him, how did you kill my mother? And why did you kill my mother? And my nephew was able to explain that answer to me, my mother, and my sisters. Because for years, we thought that he drowned my sister because she was found in the bathtub. So we thought that he popped in, broke in, she was in the tub, and he drowned her. So opposite of how the story happened. So there was some closure once we learned. There was closure. So all of those questions of wondering, and I remember what he looked like, so I don't want to look at him. And I don't have any questions for him. Because the way that the law works, it went through my nephew asking his dad, and he was able to return those answers to us. So we all know and have that closure. But that was a really good question to ask, because I would have asked that question. So very good question.
Thank you. Just
MashaAllah. Yes, Brother Ahem.
Thank you. My question is something that we face in CAIR, which is about bullying. We have to lead, workshops on, youth bullying with parents. How can they address the question of bullying? So I was wondering if the panel had some thoughts, quick thoughts on this. I know it's a big matter, but any sort of quick thoughts on how parent-child relationship around the question of bullying should be approached from your own expertise. How to identify, when the child is going through bullying, and if that is identifiable, if the child approaches, how do we sort of develop that relationship and the discourse around it?
I believe one of the panelists, I think it was sister here, I'm sorry, I forgot, sure, that one of the things that we notice is that when a person is hurting, they will either display that same hurt, they want to hurt someone else. I think it was Mahad mentioned that, yeah. That's because I work at the school district, I see that very often, that we'll have children who are hurting and they will become bullied. They will become the bullier. Because they want to display, or they're displaying a way of trying to get help, in a sense. So they will have those hurt feelings and eventually it would have to come out. It can't be bottled up forever. So they look for a similar situation to what they've been exposed to. And bullies are usually, their targets are usually someone who's not on their same level. So it may be someone who's not socially accepted in the crowd, or a person who is smaller, a person who is maybe thinner, or a person who may be bigger, a person who is, so they look for an uneven balance to find a reason for them to act out on their emotions. So that's a telltale sign that those children need addressing as much as the victim. So the perpetrator as well as the victim are both in need of assistance and support.
In addition to that, I would say, so basically, people who bully are really kids who don't feel control. They might come from a family where the father is very controlling and they don't have options, or some other similar problem. So then they bully, and for the aforementioned reasons, and I think you did a good job in describing that. I would just add that it's something that you want to address. In other words, you don't want to ignore it. You don't want to tell your kid, just forget about it. And it's a very difficult, challenging thing to address, because often when the kid addresses the bully, or if you go to the principal, that's usually seemingly, initially, the worst thing you can do, because it's just ups the amps for the bullier. They will get worse. They usually don't get better. And we have an example of that with our national leader. So, you want to address it. You do not address it. And usually when the kid, if they have enough nerve, or the wife, or the husband, or the co-worker, it happens at work too. If you address the person and confront them, usually bullies choose somebody else. But they might resist it. But you definitely want to identify that the help needs to go to both parties. Both parties, but you never accept it. You don't ignore it, and you have the bullier has to be confronted by the bullier, or bullied person, the bullied person. Yes, that's very important.
I think one thing that we don't talk about in the older bullying workshops that need to come up in the conversations nowadays is that in the past when someone was bullied, it happened in the four walls of a school or during recess. And then when the person came home, it was done. You could see the signs on them, but it wasn't happening at home. Nowadays, obviously, it's not like that. When a child who's being bullied in school comes home, they face it again online. And they're getting cyberbullied on Facebook, Instagram, whatever accounts they have. And there's no escape at that point, right? It's not enough to come home. So having a conversation and adding that to your workshops, I think that would be something beneficial for the community, adding cyberbullying, the signs of it, how to combat it, how to talk to your kids about the internet and how to use it safely. The other thing is, as far as recognizing the signs of bullying in your child, I think when we talk about this, I always get a picture of a parent kind of like looking at their child from a place where the child can't see them and peering through the door and trying to like recognize signs of the child from afar. Just talk to your kid, right? Have a conversation with them, have open communication channels that you've established from the beginning so that they feel comfortable and safe enough to tell you and they feel like they're gonna have a conversation. Because one of two things will happen. You'll have a parent who's like, you know, who's this kid's parent? I'm gonna go and take care of this for you, and they just rush to do that, and it goes from a conversation to something that the kid did not want. The other option is that you have a parent who becomes too overwhelmed by this and now is like trying to control the child's every move, and you know, maybe we should take you out of the school, maybe we should take all these other really big measures, and it doesn't really count for that or qualify for that. So I think those are the two things to mention, is that to incorporate something about cyberbullying into the workshops, and the other thing is to teach parents how to talk to their kids in general and how to have conversations, not just about bullying, but any difficult topic.
One of the things I want to add is that we have to trust, we have to have instill in our children a certain amount of trust in all our environments, because our kids, a lot of times we said peace starts at home, but 6-7 hours out of the day, they're in school. And another part of that, they're in society, in the community, in the playgrounds, or with friends. So it doesn't stop there. You can begin home, but it doesn't stop there. In school, there should be a person where the child should feel a sense of safety, a person that they can confide in, a person that they can go to. Because sometimes subjects, they don't feel that they can go and speak to their parents. So it's always important for the parents to take that extra step and make sure that they themselves identify the person who can connect with their child. It could be the school nurse. It could be the school psychologist. It could be, like myself, the school bilingual counselor. It could be a teacher. It could be, you know, anyone. It could be someone that they can connect to, because in every school there is a system. And that system is put in place because it should work. And if we depend or expect that those systems are going to be put in place, they will work. So as a parent, we have to advocate for our children, keep ourselves aware of how they're feeling, talking to them, and identifying people that they can go to and trust. 6-7 hours a day is a long day for your child to spend in the care of an environment that you trust. And sometimes those environments are the same environments that are causing the problems that our children are having. So we need to know those things. And if we cannot identify those things, our children are going to be hurting, they're going to be in pain, and they're going to be displaying behaviors psychologically, physically, emotionally, in many ways, even academically. And we don't open the communication channels, then we can't help them. The first and foremost important step is to speak to our kids.
So with bullying, you're going to notice something different. So say you have a kid who you did not have or establish open communications with, because remember, you didn't know, because your parents didn't teach you, and you don't know how to do it, and you're doing the best you know how. Most people do that in life, the best they know how. So now you have this kid who you don't have this open communication with. So another thing that we want to consider, because all this is significant information, is to notice that if there is a drastic change. So in other words, the kid used to be a straight A student, and now they're getting all Fs. They used to want to go out with their friends, now they're withdrawing. Major changes in their personality and their activity. The other thing is, and I learned this from my Jewish counterparts. My children went to Friends Central in Wynwood. And their parents, I learned from the parents, that they tell their children, and they ask their children about their teachers, who do you like the most? So instead of just getting friends that are their age, at Friends Central, one of the significant things is that the kids, develop bonds with the teachers too. So you have your kid, you talk to them about the first day, which teacher did you like, who you don't like, whatever, and then say, well, why don't you go and talk to him after class, or try to help him in his classroom or her classroom. And so at Friends Central, it's like a family. So it's not just you're bonding with your friends, but you find the teacher. It might be the art teacher. It might be the drama teacher. It might be the music director because you're in the jazz band, or it might be your English teacher. So you teach your children to develop relationships with the adults at school. Go by and say hello to them. And what's the other famous thing that we used to do? Give the one that you love the best an apple. You know, you give your teacher an apple, right? Or you give them a gift, a small gift. And my children did that. And to this day, my children, my youngest ones, they graduated in 09 and 12, and they still have a relationship with these teachers. And that would be your saving grace. So she doesn't feel comfortable, he doesn't feel comfortable with the parent, because remember, we teach them religion. And so sometimes they want to present themselves as these perfect kids, and they're afraid. And remember, sometimes the bullier might tell them, or the abuser might tell them not to tell, that they're going to destroy things, they're going to ruin relationships, and it's going to get worse if they tell. And so you don't go to your mother, and you're afraid to. So if you open the chances of them being close to someone else that's an adult who can advocate for them and help with the process, that's a very significant thing. I didn't even realize when my kids were very young the value of my co-parents telling their children to be friends with the teacher. I didn't get it. But as time passed, their life was, so my kids were there from pre-K all the way out, is very valuable. And to this day, I have connections because of these relationships of my children with teachers who they maintain. So you want to do that also.
So I want to add to that also, empowering your child, teaching them about bullying. It's not enough that we know about bullying. They need to know about bullying, what to do about it. I remember when my daughter was in high school, and I remember her going through this kind of stuff. And, you know, as what you said, she had a good relationship with one of the male teachers. So he used to advise her. I think it's important for the children to feel empowered, confident, they have self-esteem, they know who to go to, they trust people that they come to talk to and about what's happening. Also, I want to mention, sometimes you can give your teens some techniques. Like, for instance, there's this technique when you tell your teenager, if they're at a party, if you see something that you are not comfortable with, just send me the letter X via text. So then I know that you need to leave. Then I will call. It's like a setup, because they will not call their parents and say, oh, I need to leave, this and this happening, because it's embarrassing. So when I receive that X, that means she needs to leave. Then I will call. I will tell her there is an emergency. I need to pick you up. So she has an excuse to tell her friends, I need to leave because there is an emergency at home. So not only we are giving them or empowering them, we are actually respecting their image with their children, with their friends. So they are taking initiative and they are making the call. This is not good for me. I need to leave. So actually, we put the decision in their hands. Empowering them is very important.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, Sister Imani?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. I actually was going to ask about the empowering. Can you hear me? The empowerment of children. But what I would also like to see happen, and perhaps maybe workshops to help children who not are just being bullied, but those that are actually witnessing bullying, to be empowered enough to stand up and do something about it. So I think it's there's something that stuck in my mind years back where, in the news and was in New York City, and I remember it was a bunch of hooligans, and I don't remember the details, but literally on the stairwell of a subway station, they accosted a woman with a child in a baby carriage and basically took the baby carriage and let it go down the stairs. And nobody did anything. And these were grown adults, and I'm thinking, where does the fear come from? That then nobody can stand up and stand to protect this woman and her child. And I almost would like to see from a young age that we teach our children about social justice, to be able to stand up and speak out against bullying when they see someone being bullied, whether it be a friend or, even a stranger, even someone on the school bus. So that's just a personal, just a personal wish of mine. So, and maybe if you can speak to how we can go about doing that, whether it be role play or whatever the case is, what tools you may think might be effective to do that. So that's the first thing. And if anyone can speak on that, I would really appreciate it. And then the second thing that I actually want to ask, and perhaps it goes to the violation of trust in relationships, and whether it be a husband-wife relationship, or a parent-child relationship where a child feels that they can't trust the parent to come to them, or that a parent can't trust their child because of behaviors that will elicit doubt. So how do you combat that? I hear things like, well, there has to be transparency to overcome it, but it's not always so simple, especially from my own personal experiences. I'm dealing with teenagers, so those are specific. But then there's also that relationship between husband and wife, where there might be lying, or there might be cheating, or whatever. And to overcome things like that, how do you advise people to overcome that? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to speak about the first thing you said. When it comes to the acceptance of the problems that we have in society, for example, when you see a lot more bullying now, and you see a lot more people videotaping violent episodes and fighting and things like that, this goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, when he forbade or disliked when people talked about or discussed sins openly. Because when you talk about sins openly, you might pique someone's interest. So when you look at these things, it's something called desensitization, meaning that the more you see it, the more comfortable you are with it. So 20 years ago, we saw Rodney King beating, right? Everybody, oh my goodness. Now, on a daily basis, you'll see videos of people getting beat up, and you're like, not a big deal now, because you've been desensitized. Now you've seen it so much, it doesn't give you that same feeling that it once did. And that is the same thing with bullying. Bullying now is in the forefront because we see it more often. When I was growing up, my father told me, someone tries to bully you, you punch him in the mouth. You show them that you're not scared of them. If you win, lose, it doesn't matter. And that was for that time. My son comes to me now and says, you're being bullied. I'll have a meeting, let's say I have a meeting with the principal, teacher, their parents, and things like that. So the reason why bullying is an issue is not, or as accepted as it is because we've been desensitized and we see it so much. And that's really the problem. And when you see something so much, you don't make the connection that it's bad anymore. Because it can't be bad if you see it almost every day. And that's the problem, that's one of the social ills that we see. It's really hard to combat when you have computers and camera phones and things like that. That's where people don't understand what bad looks like now. And that's the biggest problem.
I want to tie domestic violence into this and the topic of honoring and respecting women, as well as the bullying. I think one of the simplest things that anybody in this room can do that will go a long way is to model for your kids, to do this for yourself and model it for your kids, and teach your kids that when jokes are being made about women, or when racist jokes are being made, or when something's being said about someone's height, anything at all, that's not funny. And that we don't go along with it, and we also don't stay quiet about it, right? These things that we stay quiet about, it makes that person who's making the joke or the bullier look like, it makes them think they have allies and they have people who are with them. When really, it's just a bunch of silent friends. There are people who are not your allies, they're with the other person, but they're just silent. And I believe it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said that we won't remember the words of our enemies, but we will remember the silence of our friends. That those people who are supposed to be your allies didn't speak up. So if we do that in regular circles, when we're with our families and things like that, I mean, it's a very common thing. When you're sitting with your family and people are just really comfortable and they're saying things about other cultures and things like that, and that comes up, be the one to say something against that. And that's, I think, getting to the root of the problem. I don't remember your second question, but I wanted to tell you when you were reading the questions that we might forget one of them, so you might have to repeat.
I'm going to address the child experiencing trauma or bullying. There's a couple things that we have to keep in mind, that socially, physically, and emotionally, the child, depending on their age, is going through growth spurts, body changes, many different aspects in their lives. Not to mention their relationship with their parents or relationships with their friends or school personnel. But one of the things that I want to bring up is in the school environment, there are many types of bullying. There are many types of social interactions with the children. There are many times when someone would be a bystander because they don't want to look like, snitches get stitches, or, if you're going to be a tattletale about this, or if you're going to be called out. One of the things that I like to tell the kids that I counsel, the kids that I speak to, is that just because you make the right decision doesn't always mean it's going to have the best outcome. So we have to prepare our kids, because we can preach to them every day and tell them, you got to make the right choices, you got to make the right choices. That's fine and well. But we also have to prepare them for when things don't go right, even though they're making the right choices as Muslims. So I find that as something that many people tend to forget. And even me as a mother, I'm a mother of 4 children. I recall, my kids, when they were young, it starts when they're young, the nurturing and nature and nurture. So when they're young, you're going to instill in them, you speak to them, you teach them their body parts. They're so cute when they're little, and they're saying, you point to this, and they say hair, you point to this nose. You also have to talk about their private areas, give it the proper names, have them experience and be able to verbally feel comfortable speaking those things to you, so that if something were to happen to them, that they're able to express it and verbalize it to you, and not, feel ashamed. So we have to remember that even though we care about the chastity of our daughters, and one of the reasons that we are so protective of our daughters is because chastity is very important in Islam. But we also have to remember that we want them to know what the biological and the anatomy of their body is important for them to be able to verbalize, so that they can defend themselves in the future. I hope that I answered some of your questions.
100%.
Trust, yes.
Well, trust is a tricky issue. And once trust is broken, it's difficult to restore, but we can work on it. And I think, it's different. You're talking about spouses versus a child and a parent. So if we're talking about the child, they're still growing and developing. And I think we need to have an honest discussion with our children. What happened? Why they are lying? And understand where they are coming from. When children lie, maybe they are afraid of something. Are we addressing all their issues? People can change, especially children. People, I mean, we all do mistakes. We cannot just consider someone who's a liar, or we can just mistrust them for the rest of their lives. So we need to work with them and tell them, to explain to them, and actually, we need to model to them trust. They learn from us. Are we being trustworthy? So they learn from us? Or are we giving them mixed messages? Are we as parents on the same page, or each one is telling them a different story, so they are forced to lie? So we need to understand the situation of the child in. The other aspect of between husband and wife, is it the betrayal? What happened? We need to know the story behind this lack of trust. Are both partners ready to work together, investing the same level of energy and efforts to restore the trust, or one is working and the other one is being dragged? So we really want to explore, it's a big subject. We cannot really put it in sentences. I'm just touching on that. But and that's why we're actually here. We need to have healthy relationships, and the base of any relationship is to trust each other.
I do think the biggest thing about trust is transparency. When I was growing up, it was do as I say, not as I do. So if your father and mother do whatever they want to do, but you couldn't follow in their footsteps, that makes for not trusting. And how can you tell me one thing I can't do myself? One thing my parents did very well is communicate their feelings to me and open up to me about certain situations that they trusted me in. And I was able to do that. That's one thing I was able to do, because it's a learned behavior. And I learned from my parents how to communicate with my kids so we can have that trust. Son, you can tell me anything. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to be upset. But we're going to communicate this and we're going to talk about it. So if he tells me something I don't like, I can't jump on him now because I already told him I'm not going to get on him. That reinforces the trust that he has with me, and therefore he's going to communicate with me more and be more open next time.
Like Mahad said about this topic, it's very comprehensive and levels deep. But I think that it's very apropos to mention that when you're restoring trust, from a place of trust and then distrust, you really have to go deep down inside and to walk Allah and rely only on Allah. You know, when we recite the Quran, we do it in Arabic if we know the Arabic. I would encourage us to do it in our native tongue too, so that we remind ourselves and become familiar and re-familiar with what we're saying. For instance, in Surah Al-Fatiha, we say, we worship you, thee alone we worship, thy aid only do we seek. We don't seek anybody else's aid. So when you're in a situation, when you're coming from a place of trusting and distrust for whatever reason, now you're trying to reestablish trust of this person who did something that was untrustworthy and seemingly unforgivable. You have to go deeper than yourself. You have to go to Allah. You have to surrender to Allah. You have to ask Allah and only Allah, because that takes you levels deeper. We all know, as people are practicing, there's things in your religion that you thought you couldn't go through but you went through, or life that you didn't think you could go through but you went through. And I think it's safe to say that it's partly because of our belief, our faith. And this is a story I want to tell you about Abu Bakr. It's not about trust, but it's about forgiveness, but it's all at the same meaning. And I'm just moved to say this story. So Abu Bakr, radiallahu anha, who his daughter, Aisha, as we know, the Prophet's wife, radiallahu anha, she was accused of being an unchaste woman. Remember? Someone lied and said that she had a fornication relationship, and it was a lie. And so Abu Bakr found out, and it was a rumor, and Abu Bakr found out that one of the main people that was telling the lie was a family member who he was actually giving him, supporting him financially. In other words, he had a poor family member, and Abu Bakr, because of his wealth, was helping him on a regular basis. And that is one of the people who was helping to spread the rumor. And so Abu Bakr didn't seek retaliation. He just simply said, I'm not going to ever give him anything else. Right? So upon this occasion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to Prophet Muhammad in Surah An-Nur, he says, I have a slave servant of mine who has money, and the family member needs money. Overlook him. Forgive him. Would you not want your Lord to forgive you? And Allah is most forgiving, most merciful. So that says forgiveness is a vertical situation. It has nothing to do with the person. Trust, tawakal Allah. Trust comes from Allah. If somebody, you had it and somebody broke it and you're trying to get it back, you really can't. It's almost impossible to get it just looking at the person. You have to make it a vertical relationship with Allah and tawakal Allah and ask for help only in Allah. Al-Fatiha says that. Or we can look at the text of Islam, all through the Quran, all the hadith, it's like rely only on Allah. So when we're building this trust, it has to go deeper than this person that's sitting in front of you who betrayed it. And then, of course, the person who betrayed it has to do acts to want to help you to retrust them. Because the reality might be that you can't retrust them because they keep coming over and stealing your diamonds. So this trust is deeper, especially when you try to restore it. You have to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So a recurring theme throughout everyone's speech seems to be conventions and how cultural conventions shapes a lot of issues that we have. For example, the parent-child relationship, the wife-husband relationship, things like that. So how do you convince someone who grew up in a different culture or who grew up in a culture where it worked for them? So parents or grandparents in India. It worked the way that they had treated the child, the way they treated their husband or wife. It worked for them, and that's what they know, so that's what they preach. So how can you convince someone who grew up in that kind of situation that changing ways matters?
You can't. Yes, you can. You can't convince them. They have to want to do it themselves. You can't convince anybody of anything. They have to want to change it themselves. That's my opinion.
In the Quran, the first ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is to Iqra. The main thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us is to learn, is to read, is to educate ourselves. Everyone that's here on this panel may not be the ultimate tawakkala Allah, tawakkul alayh, but this is the means, the path in which we can educate ourselves, to better ourselves, to make our homes safe, make our homes happy, and to instill in our children the skills and the tools that they need to have that same environment, regardless of where they go, and regardless of the choices that they've made in their lives. They can always turn back to, one, the education that they've received, be that from their parents, be that from a therapist, be that from a teacher, wherever it is. That's never going to go away. And the tools, in order for them to use that education and that knowledge, to be able to implement it in their life. So when you just tawakkal Allah, Allah gives you the means to be able to tawakkal alayh, because you're tawakkal alayh, He gives you the means, and you have to do your part and want to be able to seek that help. It reminds me, sister, when you were speaking, it reminded me of a joke where a person there were 3 people in a boat, and the boat, the motor went out, and the gentlemen were stranded in the ocean, and one of them said, listen, I'm going to try to swim to land. The other one said, I'm gonna go to the other side. Maybe the land is closer on that end. The third one said, no, I'm gonna pray to God. and I'm gonna leave it in God's hands. So, a couple of boats passed by, and the gentleman says, no, go ahead. I'm waiting for Allah or for God to help me. The second one goes by, same thing. And the third choice, he says, God, I've been asking you, and I've been asking, and I've been waiting on you, but, you haven't helped me out of this situation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I sent you 2 boats. You asked and I helped. So we don't know always what's the means and having that to walk in, but you have to do your part to seek that support.
That's exactly what I meant.
One thing that we have to understand is that therapy has to be culturally competent. I only deal with African Americans or Americans because that's my culture. And I don't know the dynamics of other people's culture. And one thing about therapists is that we don't convince anyone of anything. If you look at each of the prophets of our Lord, they didn't convince, they played to the intellect. The intellect is, why would it be more than one God? If it's more than one God, then wouldn't this happen? Now, if it's one God, wouldn't this happen? So you play for a cognitive dissonance, and you play towards their understanding versus their perception of the truth, and let those two battle with each other. And we know 100% of the time, the truth always prevails. So if you play as a therapist, you play against their truth, so they can battle it within themselves, so they can change their mind. Because if you force someone to change their mind, they're only doing it because you're telling them to do it. If you look at the slave time, Christianity was forced on them. How was Christianity forced? Because Jesus is white. Therefore, if God is white, that means we're better than you. So that was forced on them. But if you look at it cognitively, it wouldn't make sense at all. So if it made sense, then that means generation after generation after generation after generation, up until the end of time, everybody would have been Christian because it made sense to them. But if you see that break, it's because it was forced on them. So again, as therapists, you don't convince, you let them battle the truth within themselves, and then you have them come to that conclusion. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work.
So I see as I practice people from different backgrounds. Daisies, Middle Easterns, African American, white converts, Muslims and non-Muslims. And you can't change people. They need to decide to change. And people don't change until they see the need for the change. So if you are dealing with someone who is from the Indian background and whatever patterns they are encountering, if they are comfortable with it and it's working for them, they're going to continue doing it. Your objection to that does not matter to them because it's working for them. So if they are immigrant and you are a first generation, then there is a cultural gap here. And sometimes the immigrant generation will think that you're just being American. I think, so I'm an immigrant. My daughter is a first generation. And I did encounter this gap when I was raising her. I'm a single mother. And I was raised in Saudi Arabia and I came here, and I don't have a family, it's only me and my daughter. It was pretty tough. So I caught myself repeating the same patterns I used to swear by God I would never do. But I found myself doing it. I decided to study psychology because of that, and especially marriage and family therapy. So I'm not asking anyone, you have to go and study psychology, but I think you need to do the work. My priority was to parent my daughter better than the way I was parented. And I dedicated my life for that. I was continuously and still studying about the parent-child relationships and the relationships between people and what kind of package we bring with us. And then we have to deal with a totally new system in the US. So there is a huge gap when you're dealing between different cultures. And some of the patterns, people think they're just bad just because they are different than ours. Don't forget that people are being raised in a different way, like was in the Middle East, or the girls are supposed to act a certain way, they're supposed to be obedient, so you come here and you see your child having an opinion. What do you do with that? You have to change, but you have to make that decision to change and accept. And you will find yourself continuously learning from them. And at the same time, you are like in a sandwich. You have an American child, and you have a parent who is either overseas or here from a different culture. You're continuously battling with both. And neither one understands you. So it's a continuous struggle, but learning experience. And you will need to have someone who's in the same position so they can understand your struggle. Because it's as if it's 3 different languages. The language of the first generation, the language of the person who's immigrant like myself, and the language of my parent. Each one has different perception. So just continuous learning and struggle and enduring what's happening, what's going on, trying to understand and trying to bridge the gap, because it's always going to be there.
You know, we have a saying that it takes 2 to tangle. So to answer your question, so say you have a person who has a belief from another country and you think that they should learn a new way. Sometimes you can't get them to learn, you might have to change. So if we're tangling, 2 take 2 to tangle, and we go to the right, I could actually resist you and snatch away and go to the left. That'll give a certain outcome. Or I can go to the right with you and then bow gracefully and keep going. So now I've created the relationship, kept it intact. You felt me dancing with you, but I'm leaving. As opposed to me snatching away from you and saying, well, what are you doing? You can't change. I'll just tell you this quick story. So I had this little lady, she's the cutest as pie. I want her to adopt her as my grandmother in the ER. She's from South Philly, Italian woman. She had COPD. She had a history of asthma. So COPD is a chronic lung problem. It was so bad that she had to use oxygen. So she would go to Atlantic City to the casino and come back, can't breathe. And she had heart failure too. And she still smokes. Miss S, I'm going to call her. Cute as pie. I just wanted to pinch her cheek. But I was a nurse, so I couldn't pinch her cheek. And so she comes to the emergency room with a pulse oxygenation of her system of 75. Normal is 92 to 100. And so that means you got to rush her back and you say, Miss S, what you doing? Where you coming from? I'm coming from the casino, honey. I had to go. Have you been sleeping lately? No. I can't even lay down because she had congestion. She's been drinking a lot, dry the fluids, smoking cigarettes at the casinos, coming back home because she couldn't breathe. Now, and she come back, recidivism, she kept coming back. So with her, she had a pattern, even though she had these conditions, she still was going to smoke, she still was going to drink, she was going to do all these things that were really bad for her. So with somebody like that, you can't even change a person when they know better. You can't. If they're not ready to change, they won't change. So we call this motivational interviewing. So we say, Miss S, so when you don't drink, what happens? Oh, honey, I can sleep straight with just one pillow. And how do you like it when you sleep with one pillow? I love it. I get a good, fresh night of sleep, and I wake up refreshed. That's great. And when you don't smoke your cigarettes, how do you feel? And I can breathe better. I said, okay, so when you don't drink the fluids, you can sleep better. When you don't smoke, you breathe better. Now, the other side is, when you smoke, what happens to you? You ask her. Oh, honey, it's terrible. I have to use my oxygen tank everywhere. I have to take my medication for my asthma. And then when you drink a lot of fluid, she said, I can't even lay in the bed. I have to sit in a reclined position. I said, okay, so this is your life. You can do this one over here. When you don't smoke and don't drink, you feel better, you sleep better. When you smoke and you drink, you can't sleep and you can't breathe. And I go like, oh my dear, I guess I better stop drinking and smoking, huh? Now she never did, but she would slow it down. So you can't make anybody do anything. You have to give them the information and let it see it before their eyes. So you can't. And remember what the Prophet said, or Allah said to him when he used to agonize that people weren't listening. Allah revealed the ayah on that occasion, that you're not a warden, you're just here to deliver the message. That's it. So alhamdulillah. So you just find a way, my answer to you is you find a way to tangle with them. Sometimes the tangle means you only can spend a half hour with them, because they're just too much. So it's your grandmother, you love her, and they love you to visit, so you go say, Grandma, I'm coming, I got something to do, I'm going to come and see you. And in that half hour, you hug them and kiss them, whatever they like you to do, you do it, and then you leave. Because you can't change them.
Real quick, I just wanted to touch on the cultural aspect. I deal with that very often. I know Rabab and I were having a conversation regarding that earlier, and she was saying she doesn't think it really changes how a therapist will deal with the situation. But I tended to disagree in a sense that I think that it would make it easier for the therapist to be more culturally aware. I feel that we're not very culturally aware, and what one culture deems, right or wrong, or acceptable, not acceptable, or child raising, expectations on their children, all of that has an emotional effect, and it also drives us to the decisions that we make. And we have to be clear that a lot of cultural influences will have an effect on our decision making in our lives, throughout our lives. So it's rechanneling all of those cultures, bring the good, leave out the bad, and let's run with it. So like myself, I'm Hispanic. My husband is Palestinian. I was born and raised in the United States, in South Jersey, moved to South Philly. That in itself is a cultural, transition. I have to learn how to be Philly now. But Philly's culture. And I love Philly. I've been here as a South Philly now. Okay, well, those things happen to a child on a daily basis. They have a teacher. That's a transition. That teacher leaves on maternity leave. She gets a new teacher, or she gets a new teacher. That's a transition. Throughout our lifetime, we'll have transitions. Take your culture. Never leave it. Take the good. Leave the bad. That's my advice to all of them.
That's a great advice. Take the good ones, live on the bad. No matter what culture it comes from.
So, as a follow-up on what you said, the culture, if both therapists and clients from the same culture, it might make it easier, but if the therapist and the client from a different culture, it will not prevent the relationship, the professional relationship.
Right. I hope that helps. Yeah, I have another question.
You have another question?
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this microphone. You can speak, please. I just want to touch on changing something. You cannot change it. My sister, and I'm speaking from my experiences, my sister thought that she could change her husband. She did. She would tell my mom, he's going to change. That's what she thought she could do. And she did change him. He changed, rather, from an abuser to a murderer. So you can waste your time on changing somebody and lose yourself. And my sister lost herself because she thought that she could change him. So I wanted to keep it short and sweet, but you can't change your life. Okay?
I have a really good, one more story. This is a really funny story. I have to
No.
one story. So I was in emergency.
You'll pass this down?
I was in emergency room at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. So I get this 32-year-old gentleman who
Came in, he's pacing, he's my patient, and he says to us, they said, I'm going to give myself some meals. I'm not giving myself meals, okay? But I'm not feeling well. I'm drinking a lot, I'm eating a lot, and I'm losing weight. That means it's diabetic. So they told him 2 or 3 years ago that he was a diabetic, and he was going to have to give himself shots. And he came and let me know that right from the door. I said, okay, I don't blame him. He was shocked. He said, look at me. I said, I can't imagine having to worry about what I eat all the time, I told him. I said, I understand. So I took his blood to get a blood sugar on him from the machine. It said high. That means it's over 600. When the little machine that we use, the AccuCheck machine, if it's over 600, it doesn't give you a number. So now we have to draw blood, we have to give him medication, we have to give him IV fluids, the whole 9 yards. So I do all that for him, and I leave him. Because I'm a nurse, I have another patient. So I get him all set, send his blood to the lab. So now I come back to get his vital signs again, and I say to him, so do you have, so I said, I understand. I told him his job. He was his best friend. So I come back to the room, and I said, so do you have a wife? He says, yes. I said, I understand that you not want to take that insulin, and you want to do whatever you want to do. I'm totally with you. The only problem is, when you wanted to get it out to work, it ain't going to work. He said, oh my God, is that what the problem is? I went, because it's blood, it's sugar. Basically, diabetes, when you have high blood sugar, it's like putting sugar water in the blood. So imagine if you take sugar, just put it in water, it'll get thicker and thicker. And then systems, that's why they have amputations, that's why their eyes don't work. So he looked at me, he said, oh my God, I was telling you something was wrong down there, something. And I just looked at him like this. I went, So now I'm still taking, so he got his blood work, he's going to be admitted now. So he's on the gurney, about to leave. And I'm in the ER at Hub, so you can look right across the nursing station to the other side. I'm taking care of another patient in the hallway. Now we're really crazy busy. I'm in the hallway. He goes, Nurse Cheryl, I'm going to be taking my insulin. I said, good job for you. Did I change him? He got information like Rabab said, people won't change unless they see a reason. So he must be able to handle himself. Okay? So that's what you can't. I think we beat this horse. That was a good story. I like to tell you that story. That's a good story. I don't know why I didn't think about that one, the first one. But that guy, that's what he told me. I never saw him again. In the ER.
Yeah, my other question. So another theme in everyone's talk is kind of self-care and sort of internalizing things that you could do better about yourself, which is related to mental health. In a way. So how can you integrate the conversation about mental health and the importance of it into sort of the mainstream Islamic society and sort of the everyday lives of normal Muslims who come from a background where feelings don't matter?
That is a question that the Muslim community is still battling today. I was just mentioning to the therapist, Brother Jess, I'm horrible with names. That 30 years ago, I had asked if we can start having therapists at the center. And I was met with so much friction. To this day, we still have a lot of friction. How this gentleman did it, kudos to him. And 10 thumbs up if I had them, because it is one step in the right direction.
I don't think that anyone understands that, and when I say this, people look at me weird when I say the Prophet ﷺ, he was the greatest sociologist, the greatest psychologist, the greatest anthropologist, the greatest doctor, the greatest everything. Because he knew, and I just realized that this was a miracle. He talked to each person where they were. So cognitively, he knew how to talk to certain people. Or how to address certain people. Example being, he allowed Abu Bakr to give all his wealth and didn't allow Umar to give all of his wealth. Because he knew Abu Bakr and his family and how they could take that cognitively versus Umar and his family and how he could take that cognitively. So people don't understand that mental health and psychology is a proponent of Islam. The Prophet taught Tawheed for 10 years because cognitively, the Quraysh, even though they understood who Allah was, they thought that they had to pray to other deities to get closer to Allah. That's cognitively. Let's focus on how to get to Allah first, and ways to get to Allah first, and then we focus on how to get to Allah by prayer. If you would have went to them and said, yo, pray 5 times right now, what happens? They're not going to do it. And also, Allah understands who we are. When the Prophet said when we commanded 50 to pray 50 times a day. Cognitively, that would have been hard for us to do. But then it went down to 5 times a day. So everything, in my understanding, I may be wrong, Islam is psychology. So you have to play to that point and give examples of how and why Islam and psychology are so closely associated. Because people don't understand it. They think that you can just, like physically, you pray and that's it. But if Islam is cognitively or university of religion, it will do more than just the physical aspect. It's actually much more than the physical aspect. So you have to play onto their understanding of what Islam is and then show them how it connects to mental health.
As a follow-up what you said, I think we need to meet our clients where they're at, like you said. So when I deal with refugees, for instance, they're newcomers, they think that everyone comes to therapy is considered crazy. Sometimes they refuse even to sign the consent form because they're consenting, they are crazy. So with this, I think once we decide we want to meet people where they are, so with the refugees, for instance, I will connect with them socially first, befriend them, not as getting like to be a friend of theirs, but connect with them on a different level, then to be able to work through different layers. So I think what we are doing here is actually promoting mental health, and this is part of our continuous effort with ICNA, with CAIR, with SHEMS, Masjidullah, all the massages here. This is a good, we thank Masjidullah actually for hosting this, because this is a new movement. Not a lot of mosques are in this, arena. So alhamdulillah, we are very grateful that this is one of the centers that's accommodating this and actually promoting it and getting us to meet other therapists. I never knew about my colleagues, so it's really a pleasure to meet all of them here and to be able to promote mental health across the board because we really need it, and it's not a stigma anymore. We need to actually overcome that and help people to understand that each and everyone needs it at a certain point in their lives. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm getting the, we're a little bit over. I just wanted to thank everyone for, not only coming, but all of your input, all of your great ideas, all of the dialogue. Thank you to all the presenters and the panelists, and thank you to Imam Shabazz and of course Masjidullah. Thank you to Brother Osama. He's been working very hard on this when I wasn't able to pull my weight, so may Allah bless you. And, we hope that everyone did sign in with Sister Lena, with registration at least, so that we can kind of keep you in the loop as the video is finalized and, any other follow-up information. So thank you again. Hopefully this will be one of many types of meetings like this and workshops, and we can take it on tour, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, jazakallah.